Welcome to week 2 of your Introduction to Sociology course. As you would expect, we're going to start out this course with some introductory chapters. You'll notice as you look through the assignments for the course in the syllabus that we do some bouncing around as far as the text goes. And this is just because this is the way it appears to be the most logical to me to develop these topics for the course. So in the first couple of weeks, particularly, we're going to look at the first chapter and then the fourth chapter. But one of the things that I'm really hoping to do is to kind of get some of the drier parts of this material presented to you, and dry only because we're really kind of looking at history and some very, very foundation concepts. But I don't want you to think that the foundation concepts in particular aren't important, because they are, but it is some of those things that we need to get through together in order for you to be able to make more sense of what we're saying about the more lively topics as the semester goes along. So with that, we'll get started on our Chapter 1 material. The chapter opens with some discussion about what the sociology is really all about, what the sociological perspective is. And if you compare sociology to other coursework such as anthropology or psychology or those kinds of things, there are a lot of connected kinds of concepts and perspectives within those different disciplines, and yet sociology has its own unique discipline and its own unique perspectives that it brings to the table. The sociological perspective stresses the social context in which we live. Now, this means that really kind of the world around us and how the world around us shapes us. Not only it isn't just this static kind of monolithic thing either. The world around us changes as we go about the day, whether we're at home interacting with our parents or our children or other relatives, and then we go to the office or to the store where we work, or the the whatever our work setting might be, and we have a whole different kind of group of people around us. Our role changes, the way we see the world changes. A lot of times our language changes, the way we talk, and so on. And then in the evening, perhaps we go to a social gathering, and once again we're very different because we're in a group of total perhaps peers at that point. And so the social context really is a very dynamic kind of thing that keeps changing around us, and as it changes, we change in a certain way as well, but we still remain a single person, a stable person. So this is kind of one of the things that we'll be looking at it over the next few weeks, is what are some of the forces within the social context. C. Wright Mills termed the phrase the sociological imagination, and this refers to being able to look beyond the common sense for explanations of why people act the way they do. The common sense is the kind of thing that tends to rule discussions, particularly on places like Facebook and things like this. I find myself getting very frustrated with some of the simple-minded kinds of things that gets posted in Facebook, and part of that may be because through teaching this course and kind of studying sociology and working in the social work field for so many years, I really see a lot of different perspectives that I think many individuals who don't work in the human services don't really get. And so this sociological imagination really causes you to, will take us to taking a look at things from outside our typical perspective and outside our comfort zone also. So expect to see some of your own viewpoints and perspectives, and perhaps even some of your value systems kind of trampled on a little bit, and perhaps shaken up, and perhaps challenged. And that's a good thing. It doesn't mean to say you have to change your beliefs, but to be able to step outside of them and see the world through other belief systems and other ways of perceiving life is something that could be a real growing experience for us. One thing in particular that sociologists will study is what's called our social location, and our social location helps to explain human behavior. This includes things like your work, what kind of job you have, and that can break off into a number of different things, including not only how much you make, but what the prestige is associated with your position, because sometimes they don't coincide, that somebody may have a high prestige in a position but not make a lot of money, or vice versa. Your social class, your race, your occupation, what gender, what sex you belong to, what your religion is, or if you have religion. All those kinds of things come together. Rural, urban, young, old, those types of things will all help to define your social location. And based upon those factors are our ideas of who we are, what we want out of life, and really how we see the world are really shaped dramatically by these things. Now we're going to do a little bit of a history lesson here in part one of this lecture this week. And first of all, we talk a little bit about where sociology comes from. Now, during the 1800s, this is after the birth of our nation, and as the nation begins, America in particular, gets on its feet, but really all over the world, industrialization begins to take over. And during this period of time, the idea of science develops, and science takes theories and tests them to where you get a specific answer, a certain answer, yes or no, as to whether something exists or what is the cause of something or what comes before something else. That is, there are very specific rules called the scientific method that are followed in order to test out theories and hypotheses. And science really bloomed and became popular in the 1800s, and at the same time, with industrialization and the whole development of whole new ways of thinking about human beings and how they relate to their leaders through the American Revolution and then the French Revolution, there began to become a desire to understand human beings more thoroughly and more efficiently, and so efforts were made to apply science to the studies of human beings. Of course, human beings as we are, we are a bit unpredictable, and the scientific method doesn't fit quite so cleanly over the study of humanity as we might think. But nonetheless, this is kind of what we were trying to do, and sociology developed during the 1800s as a result of the desire to understand human behavior better using the scientific method. Now, some of the old faces in sociology, and I want to tell you, not necessarily do I want you to memorize these people and what they believe now, but I'm also going to tell you that probably your test, the first test, is going to have some of these guys and women in it and what they stood for. And so, my suggestion, because the test can be an open book, is to kind of keep your book open to the spot where we run through these thinkers, so that perhaps you may have some help answering those questions. There shouldn't be too many of them in any event, but some of these old thinkers that I want you to be introduced to, so that because you'll hear their names throughout the semester. One is Auguste Comte, who is somebody who lived in France and is considered to be the first sociologist to really advocate using sociology to study social life. He was an advocate of social reform, and so he thought that the study of sociology, in fact he termed the term sociology, that he thought the study of sociology would help human beings to advance the cause of men and women in the world, and to improve the world. Spencer, who was a social Darwinist, came from England, and he disagreed with Comte about what sociology should do, and he didn't see it as something that should be used in guiding reform. Spencer believed in, the term that was coined was social Darwinism. Remember, Darwinism was Charles Darwin studied evolution, and out of that came up with a notion of the fact that that the strongest in the species are the ones that survive, and that the weak in a species are eliminated is a good thing for the species, because the genes that make them weaker are eliminated through their death. They don't get perpetuated through reproduction. And so a Darwinian thought is that evolution is a positive thing, and that only the strong survive. And the strongest and the best are the ones that reproduce. So Spencer took Darwin's thinking and kind of applied it to human beings as well, which is, it's a little different when you look into, when you're studying the habits of wolves or caribou or something like that, and you're talking about evolution. But when you start talking about human beings, there are other implications involved with, what he called the survival of the fittest. So that he believes that societies, just like species, evolve from lower to higher forms, and that it's a natural process. And so Darwin, or rather Spencer, was one who wouldn't have believed that we should use what we learn in sociology to change things. He believed in evolution, I think, and believed that sociology may be able to explain what happens, but shouldn't be used for reform purposes. You are probably familiar with the name of Karl Marx, and he is associated with the development of communism, but really Marx was an economist, and I think the field of sociology claims him some too, because he really did look at how human beings get along, and he in particular studied class conflict and believed that the conflict between the upper and lower classes, the factory owners, and the workers, basically, is what really shapes human history. The proletariat being the owners, and the bourgeoisie being the workers. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. The proletariat being the workers, the bourgeoisie being the owners. Forgive me for that. Those are foreign words, and sometimes I get them mixed up. But Marxism isn't the same as communism, and in fact he made the comment that he wasn't a communist. So it's very important to keep this in mind. And as we study some of the things, and Marx's thinking will come up frequently throughout the semester, work real hard to detach yourself from any kind of feelings you may have about communism, because as Americans, for generations, we have been raised believing that communism is evil, and I think it still continues to linger even with the young people today, even though communist Russia fell 20 some years ago. So try to remove the value judgment when we talk about this and look at what he says. Marxist theory really is the basis of one of the perspectives we're going to talk about later on this week. Durkheim was a sociology professor, in fact, and studied social integration. And he, in particular, his name is associated with studies of suicide. And he tied suicide rates to to social conditions such that he explained the hopelessness that comes with suicide. He referred to it as anomie. That's anomie. Anomie is that condition where you feel like nothing really matters, and there's no rules, no norms. You just feel very disconnected with everything around you. And he tied anomie to the suicide rate, and kind of postulated that people commit suicide when they feel very disconnected from others around them and don't feel as though they're integrated into the world. Weber looked at evolution, and rather than Marx seeing economics being the driving force in human history, Weber believed it was religion. And he said, actually, it was interesting, he noted that the Protestant work ethic, this notion that it's one should work, and that it's moral to work and you're immoral if you don't work, that this really was tied to the rise of capitalism, that the work ethic was there first and capitalism developed out of that, basically, not the other way around, according to Weber. For many, many years, there weren't many women in sociology textbooks, and it really did reflect some sexist thinking in early sociology. And really, in the 1800s, as sociology developed, the notion was really women, their place was in the home, taking care of the children, and very, very few women ever got into a higher education situation in those years. Harriet Martineau being one of these, and was very active in studying the human interaction in sociology in the 1800s, even before Durkheim, way before Durkheim and Weber, and had translated some of the earliest sociological works from French to English. Jane Addams, as a social worker, I'm very familiar with Jane Addams. She came from a very privileged background, was sent to England to study, and while she was there, discovered the settlement houses there, where wealthy individuals moved into the inner city basically to work with the poor, to help them develop their skills, and to help organize them so that they could essentially challenge the institutions of society so that perhaps they could have a better life that way. That rather than seeing, as much of the social work field does, relying upon the medical model, seeing the client as somebody who needs our help, as sort of somebody who lacks something or who has an illness or something a deficiency that needs to be fixed. The settlement house movement saw them as strong people who just needed more education and organization, and so really capitalized on the client's strengths. And so she came back from England and founded the first settlement house in Chicago called Hull House in 1889. And interestingly, Hull House still stands. It's very near the base of the Sears Tower. If you ever go up the Sears Tower in Chicago, you will find Hull House down there in one of the little maps when you look down what's below you. And Hull House as a social reform location really continued to work, but closed within the last year or so, within the last few years, because of lack of funding and things. But it was in existence for well over 100 years. Jane Addams went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1931. Although considered a social worker by social workers, again, sociology kind of lays claim to her because her ideas really had an impact upon many things that occurred in the early 1900s in our history. W.E.B. Du Bois was the first African American to earn a doctorate at Harvard. And published works on race relations very prolifically throughout the turn of the last century. Was very active in social reform and in gathering data about race relations, and eventually went on to found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored Persons, NAACP, and is considered to be a sociologist as well. Parson and Mills really looked at different kinds of models of society and really had a great deal of influence on sociologists throughout the 20th century. C. Wright Mills in particular was focused upon social reform and looked at the relationships once again between the wealthy and not even so much the wealthy but the elite in a society, and these are the leaders of business, politics, and the military, bankers and those kinds of things, and how they influence our politics, those elite. And Mills's theories about the power elite really suggest that the popular vote has very little to do with what goes on in America, that really it is the influence of the power elite on our leaders, our political leaders, that shape and affect the way our society develops and what happens in our nation. There will be more on that later on in this semester, and I think you'll find it very interesting. And so, in closing this particular part of this week's lecture, really, if you look at the theories, you have some theorists who believe that you should use the information in sociology to go about creating reform in society that may be necessary, while others are much more intellectual and really seem to kind of take the stance that we need to understand what's going on, but we shouldn't be manipulating what goes on, that whether it be evolution or whatever the reason that society emerges and changes as society should emerge and change, and to mess with that really kind of causes problems for the future. So you're looking at kind of basic sociology, which really is all about knowledge and developing more awareness of what goes on, versus applied sociology, which is really about producing change with that information. In some respects, well, they refer to it on this chart as clinical sociology, but I would say in some respects really social work is with some other things brought into it, is applied sociology. But social work also uses other fields of study to form the foundation of its theories, not just sociology. But you understand there that we're looking at something where we simply do the research and develop the information, versus we really go out and try to change the world because of this information that we have, and all those different kinds of stages in between, where we might criticize society or we might evaluate programs and suggest solutions as opposed to creating reform. So there's a lot of different things that sociologists do, and different ways that sociologists see their role in society. And I do believe, I think, as you read the Henslin text, and this is one of the reasons I like his textbook so much, is because he really is very much in the towards the end of applied sociology. This is a man who writes about these things with a conscience, and he can't step back from the things that he writes about and not observe how these things actually work in the real world. And so I think you'll find his writing also to be very socially conscious, and again, probably much more of an applied sociologist than the basic theoretician. And it's one of the reasons why I think this textbook is much more lively and interesting for us to work through. Okay, that is the first part of this week's lecture. Now, actually, because we cover a couple different chapters, there will be several parts this week, but Chapter 1, this is the first part of Chapter 1 lecture. I'm going to end this here. Get up and get yourself a cup of coffee or do whatever you want to do, and then come on back and click on the next window, which will give you Part 2 of the lecture on Chapter 1 for this week. Thank you.